Welcome to the Recovery Cast, brought to you by Hills and Rangers Private.
Welcome to the Recovery Cast, brought to you by Hills and Rangers Private. My name is Alexis, and I'm a former alcoholic and addict, now in recovery. The Recovery Cast is a podcast created by people in recovery from alcoholism and addiction, for people in recovery from alcoholism and addiction. This podcast is meant as a support tool for those in recovery. Everyone who participates in this podcast is in an active recovery program. We are not affiliated with any one recovery methodology and will focus on a variety of different types of recovery, including 12-step recovery, otherwise known as Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, Smart Recovery, Celebrate Recovery, Recovery Dharma, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, and more. And a quick disclaimer. This podcast is intended to be informative. A podcast alone cannot support your sobriety and recovery, so we suggest it only as one component of a daily recovery routine. For more information on what recovery is, go to www.rehab.melbourne. Hi, Ollie.
Hey. Welcome back to another installment of the Recovery Cast, Alexis.
Thank you.
So today's reading is on December the 8th, and it's a great one. It's called Calling a Defect a Defect. And it goes like this. When we see how our defects exist in our lives and accept them, we can let go of them and get on with our new life. Basic text, page 35. Sometimes our readiness to have our character defects removed depends on what we call them. If misnaming our defects makes them seem less defective, we may be unable to see the damage they cause. And if they seem to be causing no harm, why would we ever ask our higher power to remove them from our lives? Take people-pleasing, for example. Doesn't really sound all that bad, does it? It just means we're nice to people, right? Not quite. To put it bluntly, it means we're dishonest and manipulative. We lie about our feelings, our beliefs, and our needs, trying to soothe others into compliance with our wishes. Perhaps we think we're easygoing, but does easygoing mean we ignore our housework, avoid confrontations, and stay put in a comfortable rut? Then a better name for it would be laziness, procrastination, or fear. Many of us have trouble identifying our character defects. If this is the case for us, we can talk with our sponsor or our NA friends. We clearly and honestly describe our behaviour to them and ask for help in identifying our defects. As time passes, we'll become progressively able to better identify our own character defects, calling them by their true names. Just for today, I will call my defects by their true names. If I have trouble doing this, I will ask my sponsor for help. So, that's cool. It's an interesting one to talk about. And I mean, for people who aren't quite sure what is a defect? What is a character defect? In my experience, when I started working the NA program, part of what is done in the 12 steps and what we sort of do in order to effectively deal with the problems with ourselves that made us want to use in the first place. We have a whole lot of learned behaviours that we've picked up throughout the course of our lives and through the course of our addiction, and actually probably, from a very young age, we learn these behaviours. And a character defect is something that we just learn and do because it serves us at some point. So I can identify with that in terms of what my biggest character defect is, which is mentioned in there, which is fear. It wasn't through therapy, and it wasn't through any other thing other than literally working the 12 steps that I worked this out about myself. I came into recovery thinking, I'm okay, like I'm an all right guy. I just sort of, had a bit of a problem with substance use. And what I eventually realized was that when I was growing up, I was the ADHD kid, and I was always mucking around at school and misbehaving. And my parents, the staff at the school, and the people, the other pupils in the school thought that I was, I was labelled a psycho. I was thought that I was a bad kid, a problem kid, that there was something wrong with me, and I really, really took that to heart. And what I actually did was I learned to control the things around me and control everything. So I tried to get all the outcomes to line up the way I wanted them to happen. Like, I wanted things done my way, because I was so afraid of that rejection and that judgment by other people. And that's where that defect formed. It formed when I was a really, really young kid, but what that actually ended up manifesting as when I got older was when something happened that I didn't like, I would fall apart, and I would either avoid it to cope with it, or I would get angry and try and bend something to suit my will. And that might manifest in friendships or relationships, or, my professional life when I was playing in bands. If, somebody was doing something that I didn't like, or there was something, I was about to go and play a gig or something like that, I would get extremely volatile because I knew that it may not go to plan. And it all just came from fear. How about you, Alexis? What's your biggest defect? We'll share them.
My biggest defect is also fear. And that was something that was hard for me to come to a realization of. I tried to fight my sponsor on it, I tried to argue, because I felt that, like, me being fearful would be me being weak. The way that, like, my fear manifests is in ways of also control, judgment, self-righteousness, aggression, like a lot of aggression, and a lot of ego as well. And I know, like, I won't, because it's just not appropriate, but I won't go into detail about where my defects occurred, or where they, like, I can pinpoint them. I have pinpointed them with like a qualified therapist and my sponsor as well. But I had a very abusive upbringing. It was incredibly damaging to my physical well-being and my emotional and mental well-being. And, the way I developed in response to that was, when we were talking before, actually, Ollie, like, you put it perfectly, like, I fought fire with fire. Instead, like, some kids in abused homes, they grow up to be, like, completely passive. But I became incredibly aggressive and matched the environment very well. Like, I felt like I would drown if I didn't do that, So, yeah. Learning to not act like that has been a tricky one. And for me, in my journey, like, it wasn't as simple as doing my, making a list of my character defects and acknowledging them for what they were, and being able to act accordingly. I have to really work hard in therapy to not hurt myself or anyone else by acting out in that manner,
They're our default state. And I think,
yes,
when I got into recovery, I had no idea that I was a control freak. I literally had no idea at all. And when I did what they call the fourth step, which is taking a fearless and searching moral inventory of myself, it's sort of, I wrote a list of a whole bunch of things that had happened in my life where I thought I was harmed, and then I flipped them on its head and looked at it the other way of, like, what was my part in it. And and that's where I got the defects from, it was just control, all the way down the list. And what I then realized that, that I was really controlling, and I was shocked, but then it really quickly, it helped me see how those defects actually existed in my life. Accepting them is another thing, letting go of them is another thing, and getting on with my life is another thing. But at least I had that awareness now, and it all. I learned later that it comes from fear, and then I sort of realized that, that's where it came from in my life, of being afraid of being judged and rejected for being that ADHD kid, and I wanted to be like everybody else. I wanted to succeed, and it's manifested in every aspect of my life of being really fearful. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, to the point where, yeah, like I avoid a lot of things if I know that there's a probability that I'll fail. And what it was like for me, I talked to you about this before, was it was like when you pick up a rock in the backyard or something, or in the garden, and there are all those little tiny insects that scurry away. I think like when I picked the rock up, I could see all those little defects scurrying away, and just by shining the light of awareness on them, I could see how they were working in my life. And I realized today, the acceptance, I think, is a really, really difficult part. As you have said, that's not something that is just a snap your fingers and, yep, okay, I accept it. It's something that we've learned and reinforced for years and years and years. And it sounds like that for you as well, from what you've told me. And I think the acceptance of them is another thing, and there are steps for that. We have step 6 and step 7 of becoming ready to have those character defects removed, and humbly asking for those shortcomings to be removed. And you'd think that that's some sort of thing where we make this grandiose gesture of take my character defects away, and then they're gone. Great,
and
awesome,
and magical.
And then all the flowers bloom and the birds start singing like sorry, champ, no, not going to happen, mate. Because it's how naive we would be to think that. I sort of realised that like these things still come up in my life, and it's through the awareness that an acceptance of it. I realised that, okay, yep, I have been controlling because I'm afraid, and it's always in hindsight for me. I'm not at that point where I'm able to see this coming and jump out of the way before it happens. It's always like damage control. But the thing is, like, even just the mere act of it being damage control means that I don't do the damage in the first place. I'm fearful and controlling, and I do something, and then I'm like, oh, hang on a minute. And then I rectify it, and everything goes on smoothly. And you know what? At least I'm aware of it, and I forgive myself today. I think to myself, well, so what? I've got my experience in my life, and it's okay, And that I think is the best thing, is that we learn to forgive ourselves.
Yeah. Forgiving myself it's also a tricky area.
Yeah.
I can be incredibly tough on myself, and that's something else I learned as a young child, Like there wasn't positive reinforcement in my household at all. It was a lot of negative reinforcement topped with, violence and emotional abuse. And I've taken the role of that critical abusive parent on in my head in a lot of ways,
Me too.
Like I can do the smallest thing wrong, and that is it. Like I will beat myself, I will whip myself, and it's just not conducive to having a functional or healthy life. It's
not conducive to recovery.
So that's something that I do work on in my therapy, but yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I'm good at it, and other days I am right in the middle of it. And that's just my journey.
We have to learn to live with it. And look,
yeah,
these things
we do.
You said that therapy is important. All these things are on offer at Hills and Ranges Private for for the clients there. And sometimes it's really unclear, and I think that finding that clarity it just takes time, and it takes work, and it takes like that grit and determination. But you know what? It's like looking up at a mountain and thinking, gosh, I'm going to have to climb this whole thing. You just take one step. And you're halfway up the mountain, Alexis, and I'm halfway up the mountain, and really, I don't think it's actually a mountain. I think it's just a never-ending hill, and we just have to climb it and deal with it, and
and evolve.
As long as we don't fall down and go back into using and back into those old behaviours, we can't lose per se. We might suffer a little bit, but it's just growth. So we're going to talk about that some more after the break.
You're listening to the Recovery Cast by Hills and Ranges Private. Now playing daily on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. For more shows, Visit us at www.rehab.melbourne.
So you're on the Recovery Cast with Oliver and Alexis, and we were just talking about character defects, those problems we have in our lives and the behaviours that we've learnt, and how is it that we actually deal with them. I was just talking about, I guess, how the role that Hills and Rangers Private plays in this saga is that's where it begins. It began for me in treatment anyway, because I had to actually just take that first step. All these things of these dealing with these defects, it's all this profoundly learned and reinforced behaviour over many, many years, and it was very much an act of taking that first step and having, sort of this kind of, it wasn't even faith that I'd be able to deal with it. It was just acceptance that and surrender in a way that I couldn't live with these learned behaviours anymore. They were causing me absolutely no gain in my life at all. They were making problems for me, and regardless of whether you do the 12 steps or not, I think we have to address them in our recovery. Regardless of how we go about it, we are learning this new way to live, and it really is an act of growing up in a way of shining the light of awareness on our behaviours. And, it says, as time passes, we'll become progressively better able to identify our own character defects. We become more able to see them, and we become more able to deal with them. How do we do it? Well, we ask for help. And it says, if I have trouble doing this, I will ask my sponsor for help. So, in 12-step programs, we have a sponsor who's someone who's done this and walked the path ahead of us and done the steps and had that spiritual awakening, which, Alexis, you're sponsoring people. I am able to sponsor people. At the moment, I don't have any sponsees, but, I have a sponsor and you have a sponsor. And if I struggle, I ask my sponsor for help. That's the first thing I do is I get on the phone,
Same.
Yeah.
Sponsor and then a therapist.
Yeah. You get, share a problem shared is a problem halved. And, it might be a sponsor, it might be a therapist, it might be calling up Hills and Rangers Private.
Friend.
Yeah, a close friend. Ask someone for help.
Hills and Rangers.
Yeah. Ask someone for help. Look, I think, even that's what a magistrate is for. They're people who you can, who are there to try and help you accept responsibility for your actions. And sometimes it's not always easy, but, I call my sponsor and sometimes I hear things that I don't like. Especially my first sponsor who's appeared on the show, John, he used to tell me some seriously hard stuff for me to take in and deal with. And for me, recovery is just a little bit at a time, unpacking this, picking up these rocks and dealing with the wreckage of my past life of using, and it's hard, don't you think, Alexis?
Yeah, I think it is incredibly hard, especially after having avoided having to be responsible, and for me personally, I went on to use the abuse from my childhood as a reason and justification to be, to be bad towards myself, to be bad towards other people, and then I'd pull the whole well, this happened to me, so blah 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 blah. That's why I do this, and
if that had happened to you, you'd be doing it too. I definitely can relate to that, even though our experiences are so different. We do, I think it's pretty normal for us to take on this badass, bad guy persona. It's as a protection thing, it's a learned behavior.
It really is. But what I've learned and what I haven't learned it, it's not completely ingrained yet, but it's on its way. Is the power of vulnerability. It's a very, very tough area for me, and it's an area where my therapist knows that I have to tread very carefully. Allowing myself to be vulnerable is fraught with peril for me, but there's so much growth there for me as well, you know, and understanding that I'm allowed to be a loving, caring, compassionate human being, and I want to be a loving, caring, compassionate human being. You know, I'm not that all bad child that needs to be punished, you know, and yeah, that's where a lot of my healing is in regards to my character defects, is learning to love myself and see myself as a loving person, so that like I don't cause harm for no reason, you know. I don't know if that made sense then. Sorry.
Makes enormous sense. Yeah, that's really profound. And look, you know, we've been saying, you know, just about this entire episode, it's really difficult, it's hard, and it takes a long time. But is it worth it?
Yeah. It's so worth it. It's so worth it. I can't even explain it. Despite the struggle, despite sometimes the hurt, the old feelings that I have to drag up and actually feel, I am so grateful that I have the opportunity and the skill set and the support networks to be able to do that now, because even though I'm actually feeling the things that I was terrified of feeling for nearly my entire life, I'm able to do so in a way where I'm moving forward with that pain. I'm moving forward with my life, and I'm moving forward in recovery. And that's the goal, you know, that's the whole reason why I'm here. And
a question.
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible, you know, for me, I sort of thought when I initially made the decision to go into treatment, part of me sort of thought, okay, I'll detox, I'll get off the alcohol, get off the drugs, and that's my problem, and it will go away. What do you say to that sort of notion that you can just stop and everything gets better?
No, yeah, in my experience, that wasn't the case, and I've witnessed it being also not being the case for other people as well. I actually had this conversation recently, maybe with you, maybe not.
Why don't you just stop? You know, why are you still going to those meetings?
Yeah. You know, so silly. For me, when I stopped using drugs and alcohol, I started to realize that there was they weren't the only things that I had to detox from. I had to detox from anger and hurt, trauma, pain, fear, resentments, and those things don't just magically work themselves out, you know.
You can't go to Bali and forget about them, you know.
Yeah. So, you know, like through having a program in my life where I was supported therapeutically and through a 12-step program, I've been able to start to work on those things. And the more I work on those things, the less likely I am to ever, to need ever use again. And that's my, that's my truth.
You've summed it up, you know.
I have.
That's
okay,
it.
Cool.
That's literally it.
Get a little airy fairy on that one because it hits close to home. You know?
Last episode was airy fairy. You know, this is the serious stuff. This is what it's all about recovery. Is that it's not just stop and you'll be fine. It takes work, but it's
things
absolutely
come up
worth
as well.
it.
Things that you may not have thought of for years, they come up. You know, and having support networks and key relationships in place are crucial to being able to cope with those things when they do come up. And I think that's where Hills and Ranges is an incredible place to be during, the earlier part of your recovery or a recovery. Like, absolutely. As you've said, Ollie,
it's
like
a
they
tender
offer
time. Yeah, it's a tender time and you need care. Like I needed to go to a rehab. I mean, I couldn't have done it on my own, and I realised that more and more that I needed help, and
you needed a supported environment.
And they have that that ongoing aftercare, for the rest of your life. If you're a past guest at Hills and Ranges Private, the counselling is unlimited.
Even better.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not just that. It's not just going in and getting treatment. That's where it starts. But that's that's a sandwich without the filling. That's the bread. You need everything I need a sponsor. I need to do all these things to stay in recovery, because without a really, really holistic and all-encompassing treatment plan for myself, like there's no way that I'll stay in recovery, because it's too much to bear on my own, and it's too much to bear just by sort of ignoring it or trying to move on and not actually really treating the addiction. It needs to be treated, and this is how I do it, and making this podcast is part of it. So what's the challenge? Let's do, where's the guitar? Let's do the challenge music. So the challenge for today is just maybe reach out to someone. And it says in the reading, where is it? Hang on. Yeah, many of us have trouble identifying our character defects. If this is the case for us, we can talk with our sponsor or our NA friend. So speak to someone who has that same experience. Speak to someone who is in recovery. Speak to someone. Get on www.rehab.melbourne and speak to someone about it and ask for help, because I can't do this on my own. I need you, Alexis. I need other people. I need, the men in NA that I speak to, and I need just to share this incredible thing with other people so that I know how to do it. That's my challenge, is reach out. Okay? Okay. And okay, indeed, you've been listening to another episode of the Recovery Cast, proudly brought to you by Hills and Rangers Private. Thanks again, Alexis. You're amazing as a co-host.
Thank you so much.
No worries.
I'm really enjoying this.
Me too. Awesome. All right. Well, hold on to hope. Don't give up. And we'll see you soon on another episode of the Recovery Cast. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Recovery Cast. For more, visit us at www.rehab.melbourne.